Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the next episode of the Immergence Show. I'm Nico Farah, your host, and we're talking about another interesting topic. Last week, we had Warren on the show, and he talked about how we can all impact our local communities by incorporating all the amazing knowledge and expertise that we have and bringing this technology to their day-to-day activities and highlighting what's valuable in our community. And AR, augmented reality, was one of the main focus of what he mentioned. For example, for tourists, and bringing highlights into how their environments, their city, their town has different attractions. They can bring more tourists and excitement into different stores and different attractions within their community. So this week we have an amazing guest who is a neuroscientist, artist, and a tech founder in the world of augmented reality. And he wants to tell us how we can use these technologies in a way that is now more democratized. So it's more accessible to everyone, and we're not just waiting for the centralized entities to build for us. So help me welcome Jon Yu with us today. Jon, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks for the invite to come on the show, Nico. It's a pleasure to be here, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about some of the ideas that you said Warren mentioned last week. So let's continue on that conversation, the topic, and yeah, hopefully we can talk about something that bringing some new insights maybe.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And to our amazing audience, we have the comment section that you can communicate with us, interact with us, ask questions, share what's exciting in your perspective. And yeah, it would be a very lively conversation. So before we get into the topic, Jon, I would love to hear from you how you came from neuroscience and art into this world of AI, XR, and all these amazing emerging technologies. And kind of like how did you evolve into this, and how do you see this neuroscience and art background helping you now?
Oh, that's a bit of a long story. I think my first degree was in neuroscience, and the thing that really attracted to me about that was this idea of the high questions, the big questions, like where does consciousness come from? How do we know, how do we know that we exist, type of thing. And but what really attracted to me that point was really how you had this emergence of a sense of a thing coming from very small physical components that are connected together, right? So I worked in research for many years and then decided to go and pursue an artistic career. And then that's when I went back to school and did a second degree in digital arts. And in that stream, I also followed the same ideas and the same interests, where we're looking at how you can have emergent behaviors and emergent phenomena coming from interconnected components, right? So now we're talking about LLMs and things like that, but we're talking you can imagine this as social behaviors, right? And I think that's something that we need to come back to all the time, especially when we're designing tools for people, is that humans are primarily social animals, right? And this conversation that has been, in the ecosystem is, let's say, like in the last 2 years, of people potentially losing their jobs over AI and things like that. I think we need to kind of take a step back and think about what makes us human. I think the sociality of what we do, our social existence, is a huge factor in what makes us unique, not only as people, as a society, but that's kind of something that differentiates us from a large number of animals, for example, right? Learning is not something that's particular to humans, and studies have even shown that the idea of passing on your knowledge to another entity, let's call it an animal, is not something that's unique to humans. But there is an element that is unique in the sense that we are able to empathize and try to imagine ourselves in the shoes of somebody else. And that's the basis, what kind of what I wanted to talk about today, is the idea that we are not just connected people, we're also people that can empathize with each other and have that capacity. And what's really exciting for me and about AR, spatial computing, and all these new technologies coming out, it allows us to kind of refine what that means. And they actually speak to a lot of that, in the sense that these technologies make it easier for us to engage with each other in certain ways. Perhaps arguably in the fallout of what's happened in with Web 2.
Interesting. Very interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, a lot of folks think that digital experiences have actually separated us from one another. But we're seeing that now a lot of these technologies bring us together closer. And hopefully that is one of the directions that everyone is working towards. Yesterday, we heard about ChatGPT 4.0 and how are being shown through that. So really cool stuff that are coming along. So how do you see the evolution of connectivity, considering these more emerging technologies and everything you mentioned? Kind of how do you see that all of these elements have helped us more specifically?
I think there's no straight answer to that. I think what's really interesting at this point, where AI, AR, and particularly where they intersect, um, is that it gives us the opportunity to revisit the idea of how we connect with each other. Um, really, I don't think everyone's happy with how social media and basically networking online is gone. While it allows us to transfer a lot of information, it doesn't provide the social necessities, like the emotional necessities that we as humans need. So I think where AI and AR and spatial computing and these technologies are opening up in a certain way and accelerating the way that we can maybe innovate and imagine how we can connect with each other in different ways. So that's kind of what's interesting for me. And in the work that we do at the studio, we're trying to imagine how we can not exist within technology, but how technology can help us exist with each other in real world spaces, and in enhancing our dialogue and maybe opening up new avenues for dialogue between people.
Amazing. That's a really good point. And we have our amazing audience, Ian and Warren, tuning in and contributing. Thank you for being here, everyone. So Ian is mentioning, it's odd to me, as both anthropologist and a technologist, to hear people say this. I find emergent and immersive technologies as solely connectivity driven. I think we need to revisit the idea of what connection is. Yeah, well said. And it's interesting, like obviously there are good ones, there are bad ones. So let's talk about kind of like what are some of the ways that these technologies have helped us get more connected, and some of the like bad implementations of these technologies in your perspective.
Um, I think accessibility is the big advantage in basically the internet and web and social media. Like we can follow somebody and then connect with them immediately. I mean, that's how we connected through LinkedIn, for example, right? We've never met in person, but we can initiate that contact. Where I think things become a little bit problematic is that we're given these services for free, but nothing is actually free, right? So they are driven by either mining our data, mining our identities, tracking our behaviors, and these conversations are directed through specific channels that benefit them as a business, right? And so it's not always aligned with the reasons why we connect as humans. I think what's super important and what's really fascinating about this movement with potential for AI and AR and no code creativity in general is that we can democratize technology in the way that we bring the context of conversations back into the control of individuals, right? I think that's a big promise behind what Web3 is trying to promise, and talking about decentralized social networks and so forth. Um, there's a lot of interesting work that's being done in that way, and I think that's something that we've noticed. You know, think what you may about NFTs, but it's actually what the takeaway I think from something like that is that it's really, we have the technology and the capacity to form very strong communities um, online, right? That are not dictated by an advertising model, for example. Now, that's kind of where we need participation. We need to allow participation and agency for people to define their own ways that they want to connect with people, right? And so not only is it now like a platform and client, or a platform and consumer, we want to talk about people as participants and forming organic communities online and mediated by technology somehow, right? So, we want to have people coming together because they have shared interests and shared values and ways to kind of promote that, without having to subscribe to, oh, by the way, like, we're going to take advantage of that to sell you, this salad mixer machine that somebody invented, for example, right? So I think really the idea here is, we're bringing together connectivity with identity, with this sort of actual value system that we as humans bring into that. And in the past, it was not possible, simply because like this had to be a transition period, because uh, all of the technology was expensive and difficult to manage, and so you needed a central platform to do that. But now, the promise of technology such as Web3, we're coming to this point where everyone's phone is 10, 20, 50 times more powerful than an entire desktop that you had 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of potential there for redefining what that is. And we also have to recognize that not everybody is going to learn how to code, right? Or has the ability to, or has that access to that education. Well, I think that's where things like no code tools and AI come in, right? Because if AI, the promise of LLMs is that it can understand what you're trying to say, either through text or voice, and it can deliver a certain result based on what you would like. So, not to say that AI is a godsend. I think we still have to be very vigilant in how it's being used, and also the power structures around that, and always be critical of why these technologies are being promoted or developed. But I think the promise of that usability, that intuitiveness, and making technology accessible is going to be, for me, in my opinion, is the game changer for where we're changing from being locked into a certain interface or a newsfeed on Facebook or something like that, into kind of really unleashing our human creative potential.
Amazing. Love that. Yeah, and thank you to our amazing audience for contributing, Astrid, Ian, and everyone else. Yeah, I think going to that topic, I think it's very important for entities that are creating the infrastructure, creating the technology, to communicate and also be transparent. Like the example you mentioned, like a lot of Web3 communities and other, non-Web3 communities. I've been part of other non-Web3 communities that they pretend the purpose being something about the people, about the community, but then soon after you find out they're actually trying to sell you something, and it wasn't communicated before. And it's okay if you're telling a story, and like you're taking people with you throughout. But pretending that you're just doing it for the community and there's nothing, and then like suddenly everything starts being paid, without the communication, without the transparency, that is not a good image that we want to create. And then it comes down to us, to the users, to have the tech literacy. That's why I've been doing this show a lot, because I think there are a lot of information that we need to talk about and educate ourselves about. because technology is moving crazy fast. What was launched yesterday with OpenAI is just like most people have been thinking would take years to actually flourish. But now we're seeing it's already here. We're getting closer and closer to AGI. And so we have to kind of keep up with it and, learn and educate ourselves and then be prepared for what's to come, not be left behind. So totally, I agree with that. And Ian is mentioning, tokenized governance. Yes. Tokenization is interesting. It could be used for good or for bad, obviously, like anything else. And there are a lot of different topics that can be talked about around this. But I would love to get into the technology a little bit more. Can you tell us, like, how you realize that there needs to be a different technology created, different infrastructure created, and kind of like how you went about tackling that?
Sure. I think so. In 2016, 15, we started to see the first rumblings of the metaverse, right? The idea of, as a filmmaker, I was making 360 videos and then started to do VR projects. And I really wanted to I quickly saw the limitations of both. Once for me, even today, I almost never put on a VR headset. I just don't like the physical feeling of being enclosed, right? So for me, the medium that I really wanted to work with was augmented reality, right? Because the idea of seeing something layered on top of the world, giving new context and new meaning and new activities and connectivity to the real world was really, attractive to me. But quickly we realized that there wasn't any tools for that. And this was when Pokemon Go came out. And, going back to what we were saying about transparency, now, what people didn't realize was, like, when you used AR with Pokemon Go, it was using that technology to scan your environment, right? To scan where you were at that time and, in a way, track your behaviors, right? So I think that's, hindsight is 2020, but the idea here is that we need to come up with a new model where these permissions and these ideas are people get compensated for what they contribute to a company, a business, and also it's that these companies are very transparent with what they do. So what I basically, as a creator, I got to this point where it's like, okay, well, there's these tools, but they're very difficult to use. It's very not intuitive, and if I want to create anything that's interesting as a creator, I would have to learn a whole other, programming language. It was very complicated and would have been very time intensive and investment heavy. So, what I want to do, I started, took on my pen and paper and I started writing down ideas, right? And so for the following 2-3 years, I came up with this idea of creating something that was simple to use, that people could just literally like an 8-year-old kid could figure out and start building and playing with. We wanted just to create that sense of wonder, magic in what they could do with technology, right? And for me, we basically decided to build no-code tools for augmented reality. And over time, that evolved into being what has become ELYSIUM now, which is our platform that we've developed. And really, the idea is, hey, you just go to a location, you have your phone or your iPad, and you can just simply drag and drop elements into a space and build it up like you would Lego or with Roblox, or if better yet, Minecraft, and add interactivity and simply publish it so that anybody can visit. Now, what so the paradigm is a little bit different. I mean, there's other AR tools out there that have been out there for a while now, but the problem has always been that it's, for me as a user experience, is like, okay, well, you're building something for the real world, but you're locked into this tiny screen in front of on a laptop, or you're in your apartment at the desk, and you're not out there in the real world participating in that creation. So we came about this from almost like a different angle, in saying that you should be out in the world as you're creating these things. Not only does it simplify the entire production process, right? but it's actually just more fun, it's more engaging. And what that means is that when we've made it so simple, it means that there's not only as a creator is it a top down conversation, right? Going back to the connectivity element is that we're not saying that, oh, you have to consume what I've created. Because it's easy to use, our paradigm is that, hey, now that you've seen what I've created, maybe you can contribute to that as well, right? And have that conversation in a real world location. What's really interesting about AR is, for me, is that with this idea of persistent worlds located in real world, is that data is no longer being sent to a device, projected on a screen, right? The idea here is that we're creating an infrastructure where data is located at specific places, and that you have to go to these things in the same way you have to go to the park or you have to go to the store. You go to these locations, and then there's an experience to be had out there, right? And I think that's opens up a lot of, once again, going back to connectivity and our ability to socialize, opens up a lot of avenues for people to create new ways to socialize and new ways to engage with each other. Ultimately, what we want to do is create a infrastructure platform that's simple to use so that people can push the limits of what's possible with augmented reality. Right now our call to action is come and innovate with our tools and in our infrastructure. Just, in the same way that you had a blogging website in WordPress, and now people use it to do e-commerce. They do whatever they can because it's an open tool set, right? And so that's kind of what we're trying to provide as an infrastructure for the next, what I see as the next version or evolution of digital connectivity.
Amazing, love that. I think it's very cool, and really not many solutions I've seen doing something like that, if any, that you are creating on the spot, like outside. So that's really cool. And because as an artist, a lot of times inspirations come from the environment. And now you go back to your desk, you may lose everything. Yes, you can take a picture, but then you're out of that sensory engagement that you had. And so this totally makes sense. And just making it easier and removing the barriers, because we had AR is nothing new. Like, the technology existed for many years. But now it's time to innovate with the user experience. Same with Web3, same with AI and everything else. Like, if you really want to bring the masses, you need to improve the user experience. So I love that you're making it no code. All of it totally makes sense. So let's talk about some use cases. But before that, I want to read some of the amazing comments from Astrid. I agree, making on location can be so much more fun, and you likely will have better results if you can try and tweak in real time. Is that possible yet, Jon, to tweak it in real time as you're in this spot?
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, we've made it. We actually don't even have a save button, right? So in our platform, when you change something, it's synchronized in real
Real
time.
time.
So
No, wow.
like going back to the neuroscience aspect. I mean, the day we were born, we start learning about how to navigate in space. So it's the most intuitive thing to do in the world, right? So that's kind of why, if we treat the AR is really interesting because it makes digital information tangible in the sense that it makes it almost like a physical object. That's the illusion, right? But what that means is that we can engage with this sort of data and this information in very creative ways. And once again, it makes it so simple because the idea is like you're just placing things, like you're building a house, you're placing things in the real world, and then that's all you need to do, right? We're building towards it being a multiplayer experience where you can see me build it and we can build together. And that's the true vision of what we get to at some point, is that we can have these experiences that are shared, that are collaborative, participatory, and also that gives each participant, whether you're a player or a consumer, a sense of agency, right? So you're not just being force-fed an experience, you actually get to determine what your own experience is. And that's something that, maybe I should mention at this point is that, we've designed this so that my experience as a consumer, if I visit your world, your augmented reality experience, what I do in that space follows me. So it's almost like a version of cookies, right? So what that means is that it's personalized. Now, that's kind of where we have to be careful of who has control of that information, or who has that history, right? And I think that these are questions that we want to tackle, and we believe that Web3 technologies, blockchain, that sort of thing, has the capacity to kind of inform those new ethics or permissions that we want to have in place that make this possible.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we talked about it on the show before, that the technology moves faster than the, cultural adoption, society adoption. And so like all the rules and regulation will be a lot slower, sadly. But, we have to keep going. There is no option other than just keep building.
Well, yes, I think that's true, but I think it also means that we as technologists and we as innovators, we have to build with that in mind, right?
Exactly.
I think it's irresponsible to do otherwise, and I think we've seen that, in the last 20 years, where we've seen abuses of this, and I think that's one thing, because the decentralized aspect of that really opens up the ability for us to allow for more input from consumers and users, and for them to determine exactly how they want to engage with experiences, right? So from the beginning, that's what I'm saying, that I think at this point, like where all these tools are coming in, it's super important to build those sort of check-ins, or permission levels, and those types of considerations when you're building the technology.
Yes, design for safety, design for accessibility and diversity and all of that, because a lot of times bigger tech companies that started years ago, as like you mentioned, they put safety and all these other consideration as an afterthought. And then when the regulations come in, they're just like paying a fine and call it a day. And that is not how we want to do it. And I love what you mentioned about users creating their own experiences. Obviously, user-generated content has been one of the main ways that a lot of Web2 took off, and then Web2 technologies, and then now in Web3, even more brands and tech infrastructure companies should be listening to build based on what people want, or build with them. That's even better. I would love to get to the use cases, but before that, we have another comment from Ian. And geocache hunting is a gamified experience in itself. The layer that ELYSIUM provides to enhance education around the geospatial connectivity is truly paradigm shifting. Ian is your big fan, so definitely the open toolkit. Yeah, let's talk about some of the features and some of the use cases. Yeah, he's also asking about some of the CX that you have seen. Okay, would you like to share your screen?
Yeah, so maybe we'll share a screen. I'll go through some slides, and that way, we can just talk about it in a very loose manner. I mean, I think, the promise of augmented reality really is that we can bring together at a point, at a nexus, spaces, real world spaces, so a context for an experience, people, right, as participants, and the digital layer, so that can be something that we can interact with, something that we can activate, but really something that augments a physical space to recontextualize it. So it's placemaking. We can tell stories, and that's as a filmmaker in the past, that's kind of where I came at this from. We wanted to tell our story. We want to own our story and recontextualize the space to reflect that. This is an example of a use case by a company that's doing something for the Paris Olympics. So what they're doing is they're creating a bunch of mini game locations all across the city, and people can engage with these games and learn something more about the activities at the Olympics, right?
Amazing.
I
This
think
is like what Warren was talking about last week. Very cool.
yeah, exactly. And I think this is something that is super interesting, and that's where this technology is going, where we can have interconnected spaces, right? And once again, I think the next layer to that is going to be that personalized history in navigating these spaces. So if I, for example, go to 3 of the 5 locations, maybe there's some kind of mechanism that incentivizes me to go to visit the 4th one, for example. But what's really interesting is that now I exist in the IP of that world. I'm a player in that world that they've created, right? As just with my phone, right? I don't have to buy into getting an avatar. I am myself. I am my own avatar, right? So I think that's really the promise of what we can do. Now, what that opens it up to is that we're going to have this new digital landscape, right? So imagine realistically, it's kind of like having websites, but the websites are out there in the physical spaces. And so going back to the technology, augmented reality is really interesting because it brings together all the diverse types of mediums, right? As I said, I used to be a filmmaker, but so with film, you're talking about audio and video, right? But now we're talking about audio, video, uh, as well as 3D assets, gamification, and you bring that all together. So what we can do is rethink on how we tell stories in an immersive and interactive manner. So this concept that I really push is that stories are actually built from relationships. And what are relationships? Well, I the joke I always make is that you know um, as a single individual, I'm on these like dating apps, and we all know that being connected to somebody is not a relationship. A relationship means an investment into something, right? So I think what augmented reality and what the idea is that we can build relationships with spaces, with information. In the case of the Olympics, maybe with a brand, right? And we benefit from that contextual experience that activates the body in a moment, right? To make it and chain these moments together to build a story, right? And I think once again, the ability to kind of dictate how I navigate those environments, I create a very unique story for me as a consumer, as a participant, rather than a structured linear storyline that somebody might deliver through a video, for example. So I think that's where it becomes super memorable, immersive, and once again, that story can be personalized to my own experiences.
Let's pause here for a moment. So yeah, I love a lot of great points that you mentioned. So from the fact that a lot of these connections are yes, these apps from Web 1 and Web 2 have been kind of pushing us towards being more connected or meet more people, but these are very surface level. And the way that the relationships actually are being formed and become deeper relationships is through having common purpose and doing common activities, and basically those collaboration or competition activities that we've seen in gaming for so long. And so you're basically kind of taking those ideas that are completely proven, and whether in the digital spaces or the physical spaces, and then applying these emerging technologies to it. And so and then tons of use cases open up just by thinking it that way, from like the tourism industry to this type of like human relationships that we want to build, whether it's for doing a partnership or a job, or it's a romantic relationship or anything else. Like when you do those common activities together, then that leads to learning more about each other, getting to know each other better, and then hopefully more and more interactions and deeper relationships. So that's amazing. And we have a few comments I want to touch on from our audience. First of all, I'm so excited that these conversations are building bridges among our amazing community. Warren is very excited to talk to you, which is great. And then we're hearing from Ian through No Code Solutions. Could you partner with Open Avatar Builder product if there were a way to bring a personalized avatar in through an ELYSIUM activated environment? Could that be interoperable across all ELYSIUM activations?
Um, so Ian, I think with regards to avatars, I've always been a bit. Mm, I've always had a question about avatars. Like, I understand people want to represent themselves in a particular way, um, but I personally believe that the connectivity that we've seen in the past with Web 2 and all these platforms and games in particular, the toxicity that comes out of it comes from the ability to hide ourselves, right? So for me, in principle, avatars, while can be an expression of my personal self, my true self, also has this darker side where people can obscure themselves from each other, right? And what happens there is that, I think people with that anonymity, people feel free to act, rather poorly to each other. And I think that's where we have to kind of look at how avatars are being used in experiences, for example. But on a technology level, there's absolutely no reason why we can't bring these things together, right? I think right now where things are at with the technology side of things, I think there's a whole working group that's working on how to make avatars interoperable, and this is tied to a distributed identity, right? So if I can bring my Web3 identity across different platforms, there's no reason why I can't bring my avatar across those different platforms if they support it. And I think there is a whole movement of people that want to be able to do that. So say like I have an avatar in Fortnite, I can bring that over to Roblox, I can bring it out into AR, and I can bring it out into other gaming platforms, right? And I think there is that interoperability aspect of it that's super interesting. I feel like it's still early days because a lot of this technology, for example, in the Metaverse Standards Forum, um, we're still trying to figure out how these platforms want to engage with each other, and what the value. And as a company, they're always looking at what's the value to investing in that interoperability at the end of the day, right? And so for me, that's something that we are very responsive to. I'm happy to look into that with people. I think the question we always have to kind of ask first is, why would somebody want to do that, and does it enhance their ability to connect with other people?
Amazing. I want to touch on what you mentioned about the anonymity. I was very involved with a lot of different Web3 communities, and I definitely experienced that anonymity most of the times was not used in a good way. It was mostly used to hide and do malicious behaviors. But I don't think that there was no avatar in those communities like Discord or like even Twitter. So I don't think the avatar necessarily is the problem. I think any digital identity. We've seen a lot of in social media. People think because it's their digital identity or account, they can delete or rename. They can just say whatever they want, even celebrities. And so they lose touch of like the common sense that we know socially. And so I think like anything else, like the article I wrote last week about technology could be used for good or for bad. And so this is again like Philip mentioned, this is a possibility that many people want to use avatars for self-expression. And as an artist, I'm sure you're completely aligned with that the self-expression of like a moment of like going to an activity or being part of a story, how important that is. And then if tied with an accountability and just being true to ourselves, like not just expecting the platforms to design for safety, but also being accountable towards our behavior. So all of that comes together. I appreciate you explaining more, and yeah, great questions, great comments. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can add something to that, I would say, like, even though, we're building a technology platform and tools and so forth, like, our vision is not to have technology mask real world engagements. I think the concept here is to create moments where we're seeding points of interest or points of encounter that we can have with each other, right? So, one thing that, because we've developed it first for a phone and iPads. It's very easy to see that it's not something that you can do forever, because you're not going to hold it up and walk around in the world for 2 hours, right? So, I think people, when they come and design these user experiences and these use cases, we have to think about how the digital layer is something to just start a conversation, is really what it is how do you start a conversation with other people in this space, right? And going back to the avatar question, I think the reason why I'm less involved with the avatar conversation is simply because we want people to put down their phones. We want people to put down their devices and engage with each other. And so whenever I think about a use case, I'm always thinking back to that, is like, where's the value when we bring people together, right? If you bring people together in a space, it's wasted if you're always looking at a phone or a device, right? We want to incentivize people to meet and come together, and then let something organic happen, right? So that's kind of on a philosophical level. I don't even know if you can call it philosophical, but as a experienced designer level, that's the intention, right? And we want to give people the tools that allow them to bring people together, but then allow for this organic engagement to happen between people.
Amazing. And we have a follow-on comment from Ian. We appreciate your contribution, Ian. Yeah, I mean, this is very interesting, because from the accessibility perspective, we are thinking about kind of like different use cases. So yes, if people can physically participate and come to those environments, totally, like, why should we add more barriers? And hopefully glasses will get to a place that we can use them hands off and just focus in the moment. But also, there are times that we may not be able to attend that location and be in person, or traveling, or whatever is happening. In those moments, maybe your avatar can be representing you. So everything can be complementary.
Yeah, and I think that's it. That's why interactivity in a platform like this is so important, and gamification is so important, because I think our attention spans are such that the experience has to exist outside of the device, outside of the platform, right? So when we're talking about designing a user experience, half the story, I'd even argue that 80% of that story should happen in your mind, right? In the way that we've already connected with each other outside of the technology, right? So
that's amazing. So what type of devices are you encouraging users to use right now in your type of experiences? You're showing some like tablets. Are you thinking of like expanding into glasses, or like what do you suggest is the best way to experience these?
So hang on. Yeah, so I think the idea for us really is that we're creating a platform that is hardware agnostic. We're creating a solution that fundamentally is about delivering content, organizing content, allowing you as a creator to add that interactivity. But how it ends up being delivered, is really, something that we can put it on a headset. We can put it on glasses when they come out. When contact lenses become a thing, we can do that. Apple, a couple of years ago, submitted a patent for AR activated windshields for cars, right? So now we're saying, like, hey, if the data exists at a location, when you're driving by, guess what? You can see it. And guess what? When driverless cars become a thing, we're going to be able to have the time and hands-free to interact with these things, right? So I think for us, we're not tied to any platform per se. We've been intentional in designing it to be interoperable in that sense. But where, right now as a startup, as we're launching our private beta, we're focused around mobile devices simply because everybody has one, right? In the future, when the use cases become more refined, I'm absolutely sure that it's something that's going to show up on wearables. And once again, the way that we engage with them, the way technology becomes an additive layer to what we experience, uh, you know, that's where we're looking for partners to kind of come up with those ideas, and we're looking for partners to work on the hardware that can empower these types of experiences.
Yeah, totally. And Ian has a very relevant comment to the visuals that you're showing, like a silence disco, that you can have enhanced content delivery devices. Yeah, totally. There's so many use cases.
Actually, I'm gonna mention that because there's the video of the music festival and us with the DJs there, and one big finding we did. This is something we did maybe a year and a half ago, um, but what was really interesting about that is how much people wanted to create while the show was going on, right? And it's not about seeing a static decorative experience, but having some manner to participate in that experience, right? And it does, the idea once again is not to take you away from being in the moment and dancing. It's something that may be complementary to that. So, you know, I understand the silent disco reference, but I also feel that this is a medium where it could be very interesting. We've actually developed a little device that allows a DJ to control, for example, and synchronize animations that happen in the augmented reality space, right? So this kind of, is not. We're hoping to design use case scenarios that don't take people away from the moment, but then add to the moment.
I love that. I actually attended concerts in New York City when I was living there, and the DJ was kind of like a technologist who knew music very well, and also a great engineer that was coding and showing the visual, creating the visuals on the spot as she was also creating the music. It was just unbelievable. And if you can have that capability to offer to the audience to also participate, that is just a magical experience that everyone, whatever they're feeling, they can express beyond just moving around, dancing, and just creating visuals and just more sensory engagement. That's amazing.
Well, yeah, it's a once again, it's a personalized experience, right? So it's fostering that sort of relationship between me and what's on stage, the DJ, or maybe me with other people that are there, right? I mean, we're already present, but we're not talking to each other necessarily. This is a way that we can do that in a different way. So that's once again that's the why we're really trying to focus on this idea of co-creation and participatory creation. And it's once again that falls into the idea of accessibility, right? If everyone on a phone can participate in this what's being shot on screen or what's displayed in AR in a space, our hope is that brings a more engaging experience and more activating experience.
Totally. Thank you for that. What else do you want to show us in terms of the use cases or anything else?
Well, I think really what we're at in terms of a platform is we're looking at new ways to engage with people, right? And I think you've gotten from my discussion so far. Like I'm really interested in this idea of creating, bringing together people to form communities and have shared participation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, right now we're talking about bringing people to specific places and engaging with each other. But what can we want to kind of challenge our early partners to kind of innovate with that? How can you create a new fan experience? In fact, how can you make a generative fan experience? Meaning, how can your fans activate each other and build that community organically? When I first started this project, like my big vision was like, hey, we want to create ecosystems of people and digital experiences that are self-contained and self-generating, that can grow over time, right? And what feeds that growth is activity and engagement and participation and creativity. So I feel like for us, that's always comes back to the point of like, how can people engage with each other? How can people contribute to that common, whether it's a physical space or a digital space? How can they contribute to that experience? And the hope is that you have an experience in a world that's constantly evolving, right? So there's a network and social effect. And I think, I mean, at South by Southwest, where I met Ian, actually, there was a speaker. He's the founder of Patreon. I forget his name, but he had a
Yeah.
really great talk about the death of the follower, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it really resonated with me, his idea of creating social, very strong new social bonds between people that have shared interests as super fans, right? So I think like there's a huge potential for people to rethink what branding is for social communities, and how to design social experiences in social communities. We're already seeing this a little bit in these platforms, these what you might otherwise call metaverse platforms. But I feel like there's a potential to increase that and add to that, potentially with some of the learnings we've had with the Web3 community and what they've developed, right? And how Web3 technology is evolving to allow people to control their own social networks and the way that they connect with each other, right?
Yeah, I love that. I mentioned that talk when Ian was on our show as well. That talk was really good. But it was interesting. Again, one of those talks that at the end they want to sell something. But other than that, I love the idea of like co-creation of your community's like identity. Because a lot of times, even in Web3, we would again, like what you said, top down, tell the community this is what you're doing, this is what the branding is, this is what the store is. And you really don't have much saying unless, like, a few of the drops and everything else. So now we're kind of getting to a kind of a Web4 where people are part of the creation. And that is very powerful with no code platforms, with tools that are so much more accessible. Love that.
Yeah, and I think brands benefit from this, right? If we go back, I'm going to use the example of video games, right? So video games are notoriously challenging to make because oftentimes it takes many years, but the most successful ones do it in communicating with their audiences from the beginning, right? So they already, as a business, you always want to be agile. You want to respond to what your customer wants and what they're able to do, and I think that's a design process, a design methodology that we should be able to adopt in like as you said, Web3, Web4, right? The idea is to kind of have this participatory engagement so that from the beginning, the people that you're building it for, your audience primarily, they are involved in that idea, right? And they might come up with some insights that you might not think of. At the end of the day, it just makes for a more successful product, right? And a more successful experience. As I say this, I'm thinking of actually I lost the thought. I had an example, but if it comes back to me, I'll mention it. But yeah, I think the idea here is that creativity is another like human need, right? The idea to express yourself, and the more you involve your audiences in that process, it's going to be a stronger relationship, a stronger bond with your
Yes.
audience. Yeah.
Totally. Yes. And it's also an extension of the team. Like that would help the community, the entities, the communities, the brands to kind of save in some of the mistakes that they used to make. They would still need to do like try and errors, but now with listening to your audience and having them as part of your team, then everything will be more efficient. So that's amazing. As we are approaching towards the end of the show, I would love to kind of get to some of your future predictions and how you're going to execute in some of these and how our community can support you in all of that.
Sure. I mean, I think as a prediction, I feel like there's going to be there's going to be a renewed interest in blockchain technology and Web3 technology. Distributed computing is going to happen. Um, almost as an effect of spatial computing and AI, um, because we really need new mechanisms for people to control their own data and privacy and decide how they want to engage with other people. So I feel like there's work to be done there. Now I don't believe that it's not going to be, it's not going to be cold turkey, right? There's going to be a whole transition between um, what people are doing on traditional web platforms to a distributed model. And I think where we're trying to position ourselves is to look at uh, where there's added value to that, and once again to help democratize this technology is the people that have access to the technology, they should be contributing and helping build up the people that don't, right? So I feel like in our kind of like business infrastructure play, we're interested in looking at how Web3 can make the platform more accessible, even, right? And in the terms of, if I have a very powerful device or phone or whatever, how can I make it so that somebody else that has a less powerful device can still access the same experience, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's that infrastructure play is going to be more and more interesting for us, simply because the hardware is getting more powerful. The interfaces are becoming simpler with AI and AR, and then on top of it, you know, I don't remember. I don't even know what G we're at now. Right? The 6G, 5G. You know, the infrastructure is also changing, right? And I think all these things combined are coming together in a way that um, allows no most people to get into the conversation of how we want to start engaging with each other. Yeah.
Love that. Yes, distributed computing and everyone kind of like as they're contributing, they will be getting rewarded as well, which is really powerful. Awesome. And kind of what's next for you personally and for your company?
So we are officially launching our private beta uh, in 10 days. The 20,
Wow.
well, a little less,
Congratulations.
23rd. So yeah, it's been something we've been working at for a long time, and but we're launching pilot projects this year, and we're looking for partners. We're looking for people to kind of come and work with us to innovate with us, right?
Co-create.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, co-create. So as a platform, as an infrastructure, I don't know if I showed you the slide, but there's you could, as a horizontal platform, we can create things for tourism, we can create things for art, we can create things for funerary services. We can, it's kind of wherever data exists and there's people and there's a place, we can create something new from that. So what we've done as a platform, as a company, is we try to make that innovation possible. And so our challenge now is to look at companies, brands, and partners that want to innovate in creating these new ways for people to engage with data, and talking about how we can empower that, how we can empower them to find new mechanisms that people can connect with each other and create social experiences.
Amazing. So many use cases. Yeah, your
It's part of the
imagination.
challenge, right?
Well,
I think that's actually the biggest challenge is uh, bringing people together to kind of brainstorm these ideas.
amazing. And I hope that, this session kind of opens up more connections. I see that you're already working with Ian and Warren is talking to you. So a lot of cool stuff hopefully happen and our amazing audience can reach out to you. Is LinkedIn the best way to find you?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn. Yeah, and I'm happy to, yeah, put my. I don't know if you have my LinkedIn on there, or but I can join the chat
Yeah,
and I can just.
this is being streamed on LinkedIn, so everyone can
Okay.
definitely find you there. Yeah, this was an amazing conversation. I learned a lot from you. Thanks to our amazing audience, always our community, always contributing, especially Ian. I love your contribution and your support always. And Astrid, Philip, Warren, and everyone else who tunes in live or the recording. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your support. And yeah, this is just the beginning. This is a whole revolution in the technology that is becoming more accessible. Go build with it. go make a revolution with all of these great tools that great talents like Jon are putting in front of us. Thank you so much for your time and effort, Jon. We really appreciate you and definitely support you, all of your effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.